kamusta kayo dyan mga ka-Hidarians? Yan. Joining us from Spacers, mga ka-YouTubers and ka-Metas. Thank you. Actually, kahapon I was hoping to do an update dito sa situation sa showdown sa Ayungin Shoal or Second Thomas Shoal as it's known more internationally. At the base dun sa mga updates na nakuha natin kagabi and based on the analysis that is coming in from different corners, mukhang eto na. Mukhang nanindigan ng Pilipinas and we were able to break a de facto blockade by China. So you can check it out yourself. The Philippine Coast Guard, especially spokesman Tariela, Dr. Tariela, among others, have posted ito yung mga drone shots where you can clearly see that the Chinese Coast Guard has tried to blockade, or impose a kind of a blockade to prevent the Philippines from resupplying yung ating mga troops, Marine detachment dyan sa Sierra Madre, which has been grounded over the Ayungin Shoal or the Second Thomas Shoal. This is very, very important because katulad na sinabi natin, last night, the successful, seamlessly successful, because thank God there was no major incident. There was kind of a blockade. China tried to block the resupply mission, but the Philippines, nanindigan po tayo, nanindigan yung ating Philippine Navy. They were not armed, they were not aggressive, they did not resort to any aggressive action. They just stood their ground, or in this case, they just kept on pushing within our exclusive economic zone and were able to break any kind of semi-blockade by China. So this is a perfect example kung saan nakikita natin na kung ang Pilipinas ay hindi pa-loser mentality, kung hindi tayo tatay-style geopolitics, na, baka gawin natin yan, giyerahin tayo ng China, wag natin gawin yan, baka buliin tayo ng China, wag natin gawin yan, baka ma-Ukraine tayo. Yung mga ganyan mga loser mindset, mga ganyan mga tatay, barangay level geopolitics na thinking, clearly has no basis in reality. Now, obviously, hindi natin sinasabi na maging provocative tayo, hindi natin sinasabi na let's jump on it and let's try to, invite conflict. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that every indication is there na nung pag nanindigan ng Pilipinas, pag nanindigan ng Pilipinas, actually we win, right? Or at least we make sure na we get what we need to get done dyan sa West Philippines. Actually, I was about to put a picture dito sa latest update na sa situation sa Ayungin Shoal. So speaking of the blockade, of course, you can see dito, dun sa mga updates ni spokesman Tariela ng Philippine Coast Guard, you could see that clearly there's the Philippine vessel coming in and then may mga Chinese Coast Guard na nandun sa harap nila. So drone shot yan. So we have a clear, incontrovertible evidence, na there have been attempts. And this is not the first time. Matagal na nangyari yan. So tama, hindi ito first time. But it's the first time in 6 years, more than 6 years, almost 7 years, ng Pilipinas ay very steadfast and clear, both diplomatically and operationally, na hindi siya we're not gonna hold back, that we're not gonna fold, that we're not gonna blink. And as I always said, history is full of evidence to show that when you hold your ground, you will get respect, right? When you hold your ground, you're gonna make sure the bully blinks. Now, I'm just trying to bring out the... Di ko siya malabas dito. 1 second. Kung sana malabas lang natin ito, di ba? So, ito po yung explanation by by Commodore Tariela. As you can clearly see there, na ayan, nasa na lumalabas itong... Because I just want to try to pull out itong video, right? Which shows na... Ayan tayo eh. Nasa na yung... Okay. Don't worry. Okay, dun sa video, actually, you'll get to see. It's just there over Twitter. You can check it yourself na there is a blockade that is happening right now. But as you can clearly see, there is also this announcement by the Philippine Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard na successful yung mission, The mission was successful and we were able to get done what's supposed to be done. Now, that's not a basis for triumphalism. Hindi po tapos ang laban. Kumbaga, round 7 pa lang ito. I don't know how many exactly how many incidents we have had over the past decade or so. So ito po yung announcement from the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea. So just to be clear, hindi ito yung task force na red tagging. Ibang task force po yan. Ito yung task force na nagdi-defend ng ating mga karapatan and sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. So clearly you can see there na yung ating routine follow-on rotation and resupply, yung RORO mission to the BRP Sierra Madre, right, was successfully conducted. Now, there were some concerns and there were some reports na may konting pushback from China, but nanindigan tayo and we were able to break it. So I think in fairness, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Philippine Coast Guard, which also supported them, and all the agencies and individuals involved dito sa West Philippine Sea Task Force deserve maximum credit. As I said, hindi pa tapos ang laban. There's gonna be more and more of these rounds, unfortunately, in the coming days, coming months, coming years. Bakit kamo? Because katulad ng in-explain natin in a previous vlog, yung Sierra Madre, BRP Sierra Madre, is falling apart. Katulad ng sinabi ni Admiral Ong sa atin in a previous podcast, it was actually expected to essentially, give in and succumb to the elements nung panahon pa ng pandemic. But for some reason, it has survived this far. So that means na hindi lang pwede hanggang resupply in terms of food, water, and basic humanitarian goods, but also you need some element of construction, platform building, or some more significant efforts at making sure na hindi mag-fall apart itong grounded Sierra Madre vessel. Now, just to be clear about the nature of the situation here, because there's a lot of disinformation, there's a lot of wishy-washy, there are lots of efforts to wishy-washy the issue. Let's be absolutely clear. No country except the Philippines has any business to tell us what we should do dyan sa Ayungin Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal, precisely because Ayungin Shoal is not a rock, nor is it an island. It's not a territory to be claimed per international law. So while absolutely true na yung arbitration award natin in 2016 was not about territorial claims, that it was about maritime entitlement claims, that arbitration award made it very clear that Second Thomas Shoal is not a rock or island entitled to its own maritime entitlement, to its own maritime zones, and that it's not a territory to be claimed. So China cannot claim it because it's not a territory to be claimed. It's just a low tide elevation that falls within our exclusive economic zone. Now, that arbitration award not only made it clear ano yung nature ng mga disputed features katulad ng Ayungin Shoal, but it also made it clear na that area falls within our exclusive economic zone. Exclusive, meaning atin yan, yung area niyan, we can do whatever we want because it's our exclusive economic zone. It's not a territory to be claimed. So we don't need permission from China or any country, on any other country on what to do in the area as long as this is in consonance and accordance to international law. Katulad ng pinag-usapan din namin with Attorney Jay Batumbakal among other real experts who really know this issue, hindi yung mga gumagawa ng think tanks lang just the other day, etc. The arbitration award was by a court under the aegis of UNCLOS, right? So if you go to Article 287 Annex 7, binibigyan ng option yung mga members ng UNCLOS to choose one out of four at least options when they have a dispute settlement issue, right? And pinili natin yung isang option dyan. Therefore, there was the arbitration or arbitral tribunal na na-form dyan sa Hague. So this arbitral tribunal award 2016 was under the aegis of United Nations Convention Law of the Sea. The PCA was the registry. It was not under ITLOS. It was not under PCA. But this was by a special arbitral tribunal court formed under Article 287, Annex 7 of UNCLOS. It's absolutely clear there. So this court was under UNCLOS. And yes, it's true that this court was not dealing with territorial claims or territorial disputes because that doesn't fall within its jurisdiction. But it affirmed saan yung exclusive economic zone natin effectively. And it affirmed na hindi rock or island yung mga dinidispute natin dyan, katulad ng Ayungin Shoal. But some are rocks, for instance, Pagasa. Some are rocks katulad ng, for instance, Panatag Shoal. But he didn't say that it belongs to China per se. And when it comes to those areas like Scarborough Shoal, for instance, or Panatag Shoal, na-affirm din yung karapatan ng ating mga isda to be able to fish in the area. So, illegal po yung harassment na ginagawa sa ating mga mangingisda or prevention ng ating mangingisda from accessing yung mga fishery resources dyan sa Panatag Shoal. So, again, yes, the arbitration award did not concern settlement of territorial disputes, but it did confirm our exclusive economic zone, our sovereign rights in the area, and also our fishing rights dun sa Scarborough Shoal. Now, as I said, were we given the opportunity together with China, if pumayag ang China, dinala natin itong issue na ito sa international court, especially dun sa Pag-asa, since we have had established presence for a very long time. Meron na tayong airstrip, meron tayong communities dyan since the 1970s at the very least. Then, ang laki ng chance natin manalo sa isang court case if papayag ang China, which is, I doubt it. But let's say hypothetically, pumayag ang China and Pilipinas and we took it to some international arbitration, let's say International Court of Justice or something like that, then it's very likely that based on precedents and all, based on jurisprudential precedents, that actually the Philippines has a good chance of winning even yung territorial claim over Pag-asa among others, no? Now, obviously, there are countries there who are hoping that by creating fake islands, they can make claims over low tide elevations, etc. But that's not going to work. It gives them operational control, but legally speaking, walang basihan yung ginagawa nila. So, speaking again of Ayungin Shoal, it's not a territory to be claimed. It's just a low tide elevation within our exclusive economic zone. So, walang pake yung bansa na sasabihin sa atin, itong pwede natin gawin or hindi. No! Wala silang pake kung dinadala natin ang resupply mission. Wala silang pake kung may gagawin tayong platform or anything like that there. It's very much within the realm of Philippines' rights, no? Now, having said that, of course, even though Ayungin or other land features in the area are low tide elevations, meron silang relevance if, so let me just explain this kasi hindi namin nilabas itong, meron silang relevance if they fall within the territorial sea of, so like, let's make it a mini lecture. Territorial sea of a rock. Let's say, for instance, kung nasa 12 nautical miles sila ng, let's say, Pag-asa, right? Hypothetically, no? Then that low tide elevation will further push yung territorial sea niya. So it can bump outward yung territorial sea mo. Yun yung value niya if itong low tide elevation ay malapit. Kaya actually, as you may know, pinag-usapan natin yan 2018-2019, there are actually low tide elevation close to Pag-asa, and the Philippines is trying to establish some sort of presence there in order to further expand its territorial sea. Now, just to be clear about this, so if you're low tide elevation, you're not entitled to any kind of, it's not a territory to be claimed, and you're not entitled to any kind of territorial sea, contiguous zone, etc. Wala. If you're a rock, katulad ng, for instance, Pag-asa Island or Tito Island, then you're entitled. And if may malapit na low tide elevation na kinokontrol mo, it pushes it out further. So yun yung value niya. So it's not totally useless, but yun yung value niya. No? Now, if a land feature is an island, then it can generate not only 12 nautical miles territorial sea, but all the way 200 nautical miles. No? Now, so the value of the arbitration award, right? The value of the arbitration award was that it proved na walang any kind of island in the area, right? There was no island in the area. So this is just for those who are interested. You can see yung maritime entitlement claims, yung 12 nautical miles territorial sea, 24 nautical miles contiguous zone, and an exclusive economic zone 200 nautical miles. And then you can push it also in terms of extended continental shelf sa baba when you can have exclusive rights to the resources in the area. So for instance, we established our continental shelf claim dyan sa Philippine Sea. And then beyond that is high seas. High seas. Now, just because something is within your exclusive economic zone, it doesn't mean that you can also do, you can prevent other countries from passing through. That's not true. All right? Other countries have right of innocent passage, including their military. But it has to be innocent passage. It cannot be na nandun yung mga warships nila, submarines nila, binubuli tayo, kung ano-anong ginagawa nila. No, it has to be a straight, right, kind of cruise without posing any kind of military intelligence or national security danger to us. So in short, if you look at the literature, you can go through the details itself. Each of this, divisions, from territorial sea to contiguous zone, they give, a kind of gradation of maritime rights to the coastal state, in this case, the Philippines. Low tide elevation cannot be claimed because it's not a territory, katulad ng Ayungin Shoal. But if a low tide elevation falls within the territorial sea of a rock, katulad ng Pag-asa, then it can bump it out further, right? Now, let's also be very clear about another fact, because I also keep on hearing that bakit tayo nagfo-focus masyado dito sa ginagawa ng China, yung mga ibang countries din gumagawa ng mga reclamation, kabulian, etc. Again, let's be very clear about the basics here. So it's true that Vietnam is doing some reclamation of its own, right? And that's a cause for concern, and I think we shouldn't turn a blind eye to that. But as you can see clearly in this, as you can clearly see here, yung ginagawang yung reclamation of China ay incomparable dito sa ginagawa ng Vietnam, right? The one that Vietnam is doing is very, very small, right? Compared dun sa ginagawa ng China. So those tiny ones sa Quarteron Reef, sa Sprat, yun yung sa Vietnam. Yun sa West Reef, sa Sandy Cay. Ang liit niya, di ba? Kumpara mo dun sa ginagawa ng China. Kaya sabi ko parang NBA versus barangay basketball ang level. So it's true that hindi lang China na gumagawa ng reclamation, may mga ginagawa rin yung mga ibang claimant states, but you cannot draw any kind of operational moral equivalence when you look at the size and magnitude and the giant airstrips that China is building. Not to mention, katulad ng sinabi ni Jay Batumbakal during our discussion earlier this week, a lot of the reclamation and semi-militarization that other countries are doing are actually in response or in reaction to, or in as a form of defensive maneuver, since nag-massive reclamation and militarization, and now even militiaization, yung isang higanting bansa dyan. So let's be again clear with the very, very basic facts here. Alright, the very, very basic facts here. So, yes, other countries are doing reclamation, but it's nowhere close. But even more importantly, sa atin sa Pilipinas, yung mga kinokontrol na islands ng Vietnam. I'm not talking about what they did to us in 1970s. I'm talking about in our era, in our decade, whatever. Tignan nyo dyan. Hindi ganong kalaki yung overlap ng claims ng Vietnam, at karamihan ng mga isla na hawak ng mga Vietnamese ay sobrang labas dun sa ating, so again, you can see here. So, karamihan na hinahawak ng mga Vietnamese, ito yata yung triangle, no? Tingnan nyo yung triangle na red, no? Yun yung Vietnam. Sobrang labas na siya. Karamihan sa kanila, sobrang labas na sa ating exclusive economic zone. Yung mga malapit sa atin are yung mga yellow circles na you know who they belong to, right? And tignan nyo, pasok na pasok sa ating exclusive economic zone, as you can see in that blue line. And then kitang-kita nyo na yung mga ginagawa ng China ay sobrang lapit din dun sa mga hinahawakan natin. So you look at the blue circle and the yellow circle. So, so clearly, this is the problem we have right now. So it's true that Vietnam controls a lot of features in the area, but a lot of these features that they control are not necessarily within our exclusive economic zone. But more importantly, hindi naman nagpapadala ng Coast Guard ng Vietnam to bully our resupply missions or to bully our fishermen. Yes, they're doing some illegal fishing here and there, and there were some unfortunate incidents. But then again, by trying to zero in on what Vietnam is doing or what Vietnam is occupying, right? Don't allow that to distract us from the real situation. As I said, it's true that Vietnam controls a lot of land features and they have a lot of reclamation here and there, but look at the size difference. Look at the nature of the islands, fake islands that one side is building compared to the reclaimed low tide elevations or other semi-islands that Vietnam, for instance, has, right? And if you look at the weapon systems, you look at you look at the claims of China, the whole nine-dash line, you look at threats of potential air defense identification zone, lahat mga yan, pag tinignan mo, hindi talaga comparable yung dalawa. Now, that doesn't mean you have to turn a blind eye to what Vietnam is doing. Of course, you have to watch out also what's happening. In a way, we're a rival. But that's also why it's important to talk to Vietnam, to negotiate potentially maritime border delimitation based on international law. So those things are extremely, extremely important, right? But then again, wag tayo magpaloko, no? Wag tayo magpaloko dito sa mga iba na gusto nila i-distract tayo dun sa totoong threat by just talking about Vietnam. So this is really red herring. This is really trying to distract us from the core issue, okay? And katulad ng diniscuss natin in previous podcast, actually yung Vietnam was very helpful to the Philippines because before matapos yung arbitration procedures, 2014 pa lang, nag-release na sila ng isang statement which effectively supported the Philippines arbitration proceedings. Now, obviously, I was expecting them to push further and perhaps also file their own cases. They have that option thanks to us, but nevertheless, they were not totally useless to us. So not only did they somehow, indirectly at least, supported our arbitration case and gave momentum to it, at the same time, they're not doing any kind of aggressive reclamation, deployment of massive militia or deployment of massive Coast Guard in ways that the other country is doing. So those basic distinctions are extremely important when people are just saying, when people are using the whataboutism, hey, what about Vietnam? Or what about Ganans? Let's be very, very careful about what's going on here. All right? Let's be absolutely clear about what's going on here because the facts here are important. Size matters in terms of operational ramifications, in terms of defiance of international law. And last time I checked, Vietnam seems to be broadly in agreement with the final award that came out in 2016. They didn't call it a piece of trash paper. They didn't try to besmirch it. They didn't try to tate their way through it. So again, those basics facts are very, very important when we talk about the situation in the South China Sea. All right? Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, I can go on and on about it. Perhaps we have to do a proper explainer, no, a super proper explainer talaga to go nitty-gritties about it and break it down. But I just wanted to explain to you guys, at least preliminary, saan, di ba, saan galing yung mga sinasabi namin, saan galing yung mga explanation namin. And by the way, just to give credit, from AMTI, CSI, yung mga figures na yan, but you can triangulate that with other sources. So these are open source sources. They can be triangulated. They can be verified. You can also go for better explanation, no? Or for better understanding of maritime entitlement claims, difference between low tide elevation, high tide elevation, those things, you can also check them out. Madali lang i-Google yan. But my suggestion is for the simplest explanation there, or kind of basic guide and overview, you can look at the Belfer Center at Harvard Kennedy School. They have very, very useful basic explanations of that. Para naman ma-appreciate nyo pag in-explain na ito ay low tide elevation, ito ay high tide elevation, etc., etc. So, again, if low tide elevation, it cannot generate its own maritime entitlement claims, and it's not a territory to be claimed. All right? But if it falls within the 12 nautical miles territorial sea, for instance, ng isang island or, rock, then it can bump it out. So I really suggest you guys to check it out. And then islands, if there are islands, in this case, ang ruling ng arbitration awards, there were no islands in the area, right? If there were islands, then it can generate another 200 nautical miles. So thankfully, we got the arbitration body under the UNCLOS to essentially make it sure na yung claims na may islands doon, na they can generate their own 200 nautical miles, walang basihan yan. And while they did not affirm whether sino talagang may pag-aari dito sa mga disputed rocks in the area, it did affirm that may fishing rights tayo dyan sa Scarborough Shoal. And as I said, if China and the Philippines were to take, for instance, yung disputes natin over Tito Island or Pag-asa, which is an actual rock, most likely the Philippines will win because we have exercised continuous and effective sovereignty for more than half a century, since 1960s by some account, or conservatively since 1970s. Again, these things are important. And my sense is, one of the biggest problem we have is that even sa media, feeling ko may pagkakulang yung mga ibang colleagues natin in terms of explaining the nuances of that. I think there were also some people who perhaps not naman exaggerated, but did not explain the fine nuances of the arbitral tribunal ruling. Kaya it became very easy to spread disinformation. It became very easy to just dismiss etong value ng arbitration award na yan, no? But as I said, despite the fact that the arbitration award did not concern territorial disputes, it did have a huge implication for us in terms of making sure na validated yung ating exclusive rights or at least fishing rights in many disputed areas, right? Including dyan sa Scarborough Shoal. Okay, now we can have more and more discussion about it and go on and on and on, but I just felt some of the basic facts have to be thrown out there para lang ma-appreciate ng ating mga kasama dito, saan galing yung mga argumento natin, saan galing mga sinasabi natin. Because again, it's not only about being a Filipino, it's also about being truthful to basic facts about the arbitration case and also its limitations. And in fact, even if my limitations on arbitration case, it still did a big favor to the Philippines. To be honest, ako personally, I was a little bit skeptical of it at the very beginning when I heard about the arbitration case. But the final award that came out was not useless. Katulad ng sinabi natin, dahil dyan, right, we can easily say, and not only us, Indonesians, Malaysians, Vietnamese can easily say, ay, walang kwenta itong 9-dash line. And that's why wala tayong narinig na 9-dash line from China. Because they know, walang basihan sa international law at pinagtatawanan na lang yan. More importantly, binigyan din natin ng legal pretext yung mga ibang higanteng bansa na pumasok dito, hindi para maggulo, para tulungan tayo. Kasi kung tayo lang at yung isang higanteng katapat natin, alam niyo sino mananalo, di ba, sa bulian. Pero kung may mga ibang bully din na ika-cancel out yung bully na yan, then we have a better... And let's be very clear. When the Europeans, Americans, etc. nagpapadala ng warships dito, they invoke the arbitration award in one way or another. They invoke UNCLOS. And while totoo na dun sa mga senador sa Amerika, ayaw nila i-ratify yung UNCLOS, signatory ang US. And as a matter of customary international law, actually fina-follow nila. Eh, yung isang bansa dyan, nag-ratify na nga ng UNCLOS, tapos ginaganyan lang yung UNCLOS international law. So, hindi totoo na useless siya. Right? And as I said, the way forward actually is for the Philippines to negotiate maritime border delimitation with Vietnam, with Malaysia, etc. based dito sa arbitration award of 2016 or any document that is true to the essence, to the spirit, if not the exact letter of the arbitration award. And more importantly, para sa akin, it's time also to talk about seriously a code of conduct among ASEAN countries themselves. Because yung code of conduct negotiation natin with China, walang napupuntahan yan. Ilang dekada na yan, quarter of a century na yung negotiation na yan, just to be conservative even about it. Pero as we discussed with Jay Batumbakal the other day, kita natin, 1988, 1989 pa lang, pinag-uusapan na natin the need for kind of a legally binding code of conduct. So, again, I know it can get sometimes confusing, these terms being thrown around, there's kaya easy to spread disinformation. But I told you, you can check these figures and facts yourself online. Check it on yourself. Check the basic explanations. Check the basic provisions of UNCLOS. Then makikita nyo saan galing mga argumento natin. Of course, I explain a lot of these issues in greater detail in some of our academic pieces, journal articles, for instance, and including also dun sa isang libro natin na Asia's New Battlefield. In fact, yung libro natin na Asia's New Battlefield, the part when I discussed the arbitration award and the South China Sea disputes, a huge part of that, was based on discussions with leading international law experts all around the world, from Europe to the United States to Asia, etc. So, hindi lang tayo nagtanong dun sa mga lawyers dito sa Pilipinas or yung mga experts dito na obviously may sariling pananaw din. But we talked to actually experts who had no, including experts who were quite skeptical about the Philippine Arbitration Award, at least initially. So you can check it there. Dun sa libro natin, I provided all the relevant details there. So ito yung libro natin, Asia's New Battlefield. I wrote this back in the day. So this is 2015, 2016. Now, a year after the book came out, the arbitration award came out, but actually the whole story behind it, the whole legal strategy, the implication of that, lahat yan in-explain natin. And you could see in the footnotes, you can see in the endnotes, you can see in the references, sinite natin exactly who are we quoting, including experts from China who are diametrically opposed stance to not only the Philippines position, but eventually, as it turns out, to the final award that came out. So again, you can go ahead and check this on your own. All right? Read these things on your own. Other thing, libre lang yung iba. Well, hindi yung libro, pero libre yung iba. You can just check them online. These are open sources, including especially yung Kennedy School. Very, very easy. And explain niya one by one, low tide elevation, rock island. Also, I suggest go out and check yung UNCLOS. You can just go there online, UNCLOS, and read it. Relevant provisions on regime of islands, relevant provisions on, for instance, yung special article 287 annex 7 with respect to compulsory arbitration. Pwede yung basahin yan. It's all out there. It's not too difficult actually to figure it out. You don't need a PhD in maritime law to be able to understand these basic things. But luckily, we had someone actually who has PhD in maritime law like Jay Batumbakal to explain the relevance of these issues. All right? On that note, thank you very much. In the coming days, of course, we're gonna watch out for the developments dun sa BRICS BRICS summit in Africa. We're going to look at whether there'll be a admission of new countries. As you know, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Vietnam, Algeria, Bangladesh. I'm not sure about Turkey, but a number of rising emerging markets or rising powers outside the West have expressed their interest in joining itong BRICS na ito. But for me, BRICS has a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of exaggeration about what BRICS stands for and also its potential in terms of really challenging supposed Western hegemony, etc. Right? Because as you may know, there's a lot of India-China competition within the BRICS. And there's a lot of worry in India that China will use the BRICS to create an anti-US kind of axis. No, kaya watch out for what new members could be potentially admitted into BRICS, because that gives you an idea about who is winning this game. Is China getting its own way together with Russia, bringing more and more anti-US rising powers? Or India might get its way by at least delaying the process or getting in some countries which have much more neutral stance internationally and pretty reasonable, non-aligned foreign policy. Let's look at that. Pag-usapan natin so yan. Thank you very much and talk to you guys soon. Ay, nakat pala tayo dito sa Spacers. Again, thank you also kay Madrigal Heya, kay Riz Ani. Thank you very much for your comments. Yeah, medyo... As you see, medyo alanganin ako ng parang, am I gonna explain this all the way or I'll just give an overview and then ask you guys to read it on your own. I'll post the links, relevant links to relevant sources, no, para lang mabasa niyo on your own. Again, we're not here to feed you arguments and all. We're here to, kumbaga, just provide the kind of bullet points or kind of an outline or at least a framework in best case scenario in terms of how to best analyze some very complicated issues. Maraming salamat also kay Merlin Saidania, kay Ma'am Jocelyn Limberia as always, kay Ernie Carpio. Thank you so much also for joining us. Kier Viola Lim. Yan, sa lahat naman nag-join sa atin. Pasensya na, I know medyo complicated. You could see I was kind of holding back, hindi ako 100% in because you don't want to oversimplify also these issues or water down them too much. But obviously, as a scholar, you're supposed to try to understand an issue 360 degrees. And at the same time, of course, bilang Filipino, you also have to look at how international law actually favors the Philippines' position on this. After all, para sa bayan. Thank you very much, guys, and talk to you soon. Salamat din dito dun sa mga, kay Linda Waldon, Ravo Fernandez, ayan, sinasabi niyan. Zach Song, Carol Felipe, Roy Simontes, yan. Punot ko na yan New Atlas kay Brian. Okay. Anyway, you can just check it out. It's not too complicated yung mga minention natin yan. Para makita niyo naman saan kami galing. Alright? Alright. God bless and talk to you soon.